In early January 2024, the FBI's Serial Crime Investigation Unit received a disturbing report from the Regional Department of Health. The document detailed suspicious patient deaths across 6 northeastern states. Between 2020 and 2023, multiple private medical facilities in these states reported an unusually high number of deaths among patients with chronic conditions. While the deaths appeared natural at first glance, deeper analysis revealed disturbing patterns. Special Agent Catherine Morgan, the FBI's leading expert in medical-related crimes, identified several key patterns. Each victim died from apparent natural causes, often related to their existing conditions. However, forensic analysis of available medical records showed unusual drug combinations prescribed in the weeks leading to death. The prescribed medications, while individually legal and appropriate for the conditions, formed lethal combinations when administered together. In mid-January 2024, park rangers at a national forest reserve discovered the first burial site. The remains were professionally dismembered and stored in medical-grade biohazard bags, indicating the perpetrator had extensive medical knowledge. Forensic examination revealed traces of experimental drug combinations in the tissue samples. The bodies showed signs of systematic experimentation, precise incisions, tissue sampling, and methodical documentation of bodily reactions through photographic evidence found with the remains. The investigation expanded when similar burial sites were discovered in other state parks. By February 2024, authorities had uncovered 12 burial locations containing remains of at least 28 victims. Forensic analysis indicated that the bodies were processed in a medical facility before disposal. The killer maintained detailed records of each victim, including medical histories, drug administration schedules, and observed reactions. These records were found sealed in waterproof containers alongside some of the remains. The victim profile emerged through careful analysis. All victims were socially isolated individuals, homeless persons, elderly patients without family, individuals with severe chronic conditions, and patients in long-term care facilities. The perpetrator specifically targeted those whose deaths would raise minimal suspicion and whose disappearances might go unnoticed. Medical records showed that many victims had been transferred between different private clinics before their deaths. By March 2024, the FBI established a dedicated task force. Agent Morgan led the investigation, coordinating with local law enforcement and medical boards across all 6 states. The investigation revealed that several private clinics had employed medical professionals with questionable credentials between 2020 and 2024. Background checks showed inconsistencies in their employment histories and licensing documentation. The media dubbed the unknown killer Dr. Death, though investigators believed this sensationalized name undermined the seriousness of the investigation. The FBI profiling unit suggested the perpetrator was likely a male between 35 and 45 years old, with extensive medical knowledge but possibly without formal medical credentials. The precise nature of the dismemberment and drug administration indicated someone with practical experience in medical procedures. The task force established a pattern of operation. The killer targeted patients through private facilities, gained their trust through legitimate-seeming medical care, then conducted lethal experiments under the guise of treatment. The bodies were then processed in an unknown facility before disposal. Evidence suggested the killer maintained detailed records of his experiments, treating each murder as a documented medical study. Agent Morgan's team discovered that several victims had been reported missing, but their deaths were later certified at different facilities under seemingly natural causes. This indicated the killer had access to multiple medical facilities and could manipulate death certificates and medical records. Born in 1987, Michael Dennis grew up in a suburban neighborhood. His father, a forensic pathologist at a regional medical center, frequently exposed young Michael to his profession. While most children would have been disturbed by such exposure, Michael displayed an unusual fascination with death and human anatomy from an early age. His interest, however, went beyond mere scientific curiosity. He was particularly drawn to the process of death itself. During his teenage years, Michael's behavior showed concerning patterns. He began conducting secret experiments on small animals, meticulously documenting his findings in detailed journals. His early writings revealed a methodical approach to understanding death, recording timing, physical changes, and various methods of ending life. His bedroom transformed into a makeshift study, filled with medical textbooks, anatomical charts, and hidden journals containing his macabre observations. Teachers noted his exceptional performance in biology and chemistry, but also observed his unusual fixation with mortality-related topics. In his senior year, Michael submitted a research paper on decomposition processes that raised concerns among school staff, though no formal action was taken. His academic achievements were overshadowed by an increasing social isolation and obsessive study habits. In 2005, Michael attempted to enter medical school. Despite excellent grades and apparent aptitude, he failed the psychological evaluation component of the admission process. The examining psychiatrist noted concerning responses regarding medical ethics and patient care, though these records were not shared with Michael or his family. After several rejected applications, he altered his approach. By 2010, unable to pursue a formal medical education, Michael secured a position as a morgue attendant at a regional medical facility. This role provided him with unprecedented access to deceased bodies and medical documentation. During his shifts, particularly at night, he began conducting unauthorized examinations of corpses, collecting tissue samples, and practicing surgical techniques on the deceased. His position allowed him to develop an extensive understanding of hospital protocols and documentation procedures. He created detailed databases recording various causes of death, tissue reactions to different substances, and the progression of various diseases. His night shift position meant minimal supervision, allowing him to experiment freely and develop his knowledge of human anatomy and medical procedures. Between 2010 and 2012, Michael expanded his activities. He began collecting medical waste, including disposed medications and surgical tools. He established a private study area in his apartment, filling notebooks with detailed observations about death processes and medical procedures. His writings from this period show an increasing sophistication in medical knowledge, though filtered through a disturbing lens of personal experimentation. During this period, he also began forging medical credentials and documents. Working in the facility gave him access to authentic documentation, which he studied and learned to replicate. He created multiple false identities with varying medical specialties, building a foundation for his future activities. His attention to detail in creating these false credentials would later prove crucial in avoiding detection. The transformation from morgue attendant to killer was gradual but deliberate. Michael used his position to study not just death, but the administrative systems designed to track and document it. He learned how to manipulate death certificates, medical records, and disposal procedures. This knowledge would later enable him to operate across multiple facilities without detection. His journals from this period reveal an individual who viewed death not as a tragic end, but as a process to be studied and controlled. He wrote extensively about his theories regarding death, pain thresholds, and human endurance. These writings showed a complete disconnect from normal human empathy, replacing it with a cold, scientific curiosity about human mortality. The staff at the medical facility where he worked described him as quiet, efficient, and unremarkable. His supervisor's reports noted his reliability and attention to detail, though some colleagues found him distant and odd. None suspected that their cooperative coworker was meticulously planning a series of medical experiments that would eventually escalate to murder. In early 2012, Michael Dennis initiated the active phase of his research. Using meticulously forged credentials as an oncologist, he established a small private medical practice in a modest office building. His documentation appeared flawless. Licensing, medical school records, and professional references were crafted with precision gained from years of studying medical bureaucracy. His first deliberate victim was a 45-year-old female patient with advanced lung cancer. Desperate for treatment and with limited financial resources, she became the perfect subject for his first experiment. Dennis prescribed a calculated combination of medications, each legal and seemingly appropriate when viewed individually, but lethal when combined in specific doses. He documented every stage of her decline, maintaining detailed records of vital signs, tissue responses, and the progression of organ failure. The success of his first murder emboldened Dennis. Over the next 6 months, he refined his methodology, selecting patients with terminal or severe chronic conditions. His practice specifically targeted individuals who had exhausted traditional treatment options or lacked the resources for mainstream medical care. He positioned himself as a specialist in experimental treatments, offering hope to those who had none. By 2013, Dennis had developed sophisticated protocols for his experiments. Each victim was carefully selected based on specific criteria: terminal diagnosis, limited social connections, and desperate circumstances. He maintained extensive documentation of his research, including video recordings of patient consultations, detailed medical notes, and systematic observations of drug interactions and tissue responses. Between 2013 and 2014, Dennis expanded his operation. He established relationships with local pharmacies and medical suppliers, building a network that allowed him to acquire various medications without raising suspicion. His prescriptions, while unusual, were carefully structured to appear legitimate to outside scrutiny. He maintained immaculate paper trails that suggested standard medical practice. The patients who died under his care seemed to follow a natural progression of their illnesses. Death certificates listed plausible causes related to their underlying conditions. Dennis's documentation was so thorough and professional that initial reviews by medical authorities raised no red flags. He became known among local medical professionals as a specialist willing to take on challenging cases that others had abandoned. His private records, discovered later, revealed the true nature of his activities. Each patient was assigned a case number, with detailed notes about their condition, treatment protocol, and response to various drug combinations. He maintained tissue samples, medical imaging results, and comprehensive data about the progression of his induced deaths. These records demonstrated both his medical knowledge and his complete detachment from human suffering. Dennis's experiments grew more sophisticated over time. He began testing different drug combinations, studying how various medications interacted, and documenting the results. His notes revealed an increasing focus on prolonging the dying process to gather more data. He developed methods to maintain his victims in a controlled decline, extending their suffering while collecting detailed observations. By late 2014, he had refined his approach to avoid detection. He rotated pharmacies to prevent pattern recognition in prescriptions. He maintained relationships with multiple medical facilities, spreading his activities to avoid concentration in any single location. His documentation became more sophisticated, using medical terminology and research protocols that mimicked legitimate clinical trials. Dennis developed sophisticated methods of concealing his crimes, drawing on his extensive knowledge of medical documentation and system vulnerabilities. His approach combined medical expertise with meticulous attention to bureaucratic detail, creating a nearly impenetrable facade of legitimacy. For each victim, he fabricated comprehensive medical records documenting non-existent chronic conditions. These falsified histories were carefully crafted to establish plausible medical backgrounds that would justify his experimental treatments. He backdated records, created false referrals, and manufactured test results to support his fictional diagnoses. His documentation system revealed a disturbing level of organization. Each victim's file contained multiple layers of falsified information: previous medical history, current symptoms, treatment plans, and progression notes. He maintained parallel record systems, one for official purposes showing apparently legitimate medical care, and another documenting his actual experiments. The latter, discovered in his private storage, contained his true observations and data collection. The storage facility discovered in his rented property's basement contained hundreds of medical files. These documents revealed an organizational system that categorized victims by various criteria: age, underlying health conditions, drug combinations used, and observed reactions. Each file contained photographs, tissue samples, and extensive notes documenting the progression of his induced deaths. The investigation revealed his sophisticated approach to evidence disposal. He maintained relationships with multiple medical waste disposal services, distributing evidence across different facilities to avoid pattern recognition. He used industrial-grade cleaning supplies to eliminate trace evidence and maintained stringent protocols for handling and disposing of medical materials. Dennis created an elaborate system for medication acquisition and tracking. He maintained relationships with multiple pharmacies, carefully rotating his prescriptions to avoid raising suspicion. His records showed detailed tracking of drug inventories, creating false documentation to account for medications used in his experiments. He developed methods to alter medication labels and create convincing counterfeit prescription documentation. The most disturbing aspect of his methodology was his system for selecting and tracking victims. He maintained detailed profiles of potential targets, assessing their suitability based on social isolation, financial status, and medical history. His records showed careful monitoring of local medical facilities and social service organizations to identify vulnerable individuals. Analysis of his computer systems revealed encrypted databases containing comprehensive information about his activities. He used sophisticated software to manage his documentation, creating multiple backup systems and secure storage protocols. His digital security measures demonstrated an understanding of both medical record systems and information technology. The investigation uncovered evidence of his long-term planning and adaptation. His methods evolved in response to changes in medical regulations and documentation requirements. He continuously updated his techniques, incorporating new technologies and adapting to changes in healthcare systems. His ability to maintain this deception over years demonstrated both his intelligence and his complete moral disengagement from his crimes. In late 2023, the Regional Health Data Analysis System detected a statistical anomaly in patient mortality rates. The system identified an unusual pattern of deaths among patients receiving specialized treatments. The automated analysis flagged a series of deaths that, while apparently unrelated, showed subtle connections in prescription patterns and treatment protocols. Simultaneously, a telemedicine nurse working with digital prescription systems noticed discrepancies in electronic prescription signatures. During routine verification procedures, she identified inconsistencies in the digital authorization codes. Her initial reports to supervisory staff were noted, but not immediately acted upon, as each individual case appeared legitimate when examined in isolation. The investigation gained momentum when a 19-year-old social media content creator with a substantial following died from complications following a routine medical procedure. Her death triggered widespread public attention due to her online presence. The victim's father, a former military medical professional with expertise in cybersecurity, initiated a private investigation after noting irregularities in his daughter's medical documentation. The private investigation uncovered concerning patterns. Analysis of digital medical records revealed subtle anomalies in documentation timestamps and authorization codes. The investigator's military medical background proved crucial in identifying discrepancies in treatment protocols that might have gone unnoticed by civilian reviewers. By early 2024, multiple lines of investigation converged. The Regional Medical Board received several reports of unusual prescription patterns. Digital forensics experts identified systematic irregularities in medical documentation. Analysis of pharmacy records showed suspicious patterns in medication dispensing across multiple facilities. The breakthrough came when investigators connected seemingly unrelated patient deaths through digital prescription tracking. Advanced data analysis revealed a pattern of specific medication combinations prescribed across different medical facilities. These combinations, while appearing legitimate individually, formed a lethal protocol when administered together. Law enforcement's digital forensics team discovered sophisticated alterations in electronic medical records. The perpetrator had created a complex system of false digital signatures and backdated documentation. The investigation revealed unauthorized access to medical record systems across multiple facilities, all traced to similar IP addresses and access patterns. The social media attention surrounding the content creator's death brought forward additional witnesses. Former patients and medical staff began reporting suspicious interactions and observations. These reports, previously dismissed as isolated incidents, now formed a pattern when examined collectively. Surveillance footage from multiple medical facilities revealed a consistent physical description of the suspect. Digital enhancement of security camera footage helped investigators create a composite profile. The suspect's movements between facilities showed a calculated pattern of activity designed to avoid detection. The investigation expanded to include financial forensics. Analysis of billing records and insurance claims revealed systematic fraud. The perpetrator had created elaborate financial documentation to support his false medical practice, including sophisticated insurance billing schemes and false patient payment records. By March 2024, investigators had compiled substantial digital evidence. They discovered encrypted databases containing detailed records of unauthorized medical experiments. The suspect had maintained extensive documentation of his activities, including digital photographs, video recordings, and detailed medical notes, all stored in secure cloud servers. October 2024 marked the culmination of a 6-month investigation by the victim's father, a former military medical professional. Using his military training and cybersecurity expertise, he tracked Dennis through sophisticated analysis of digital records and surveillance data. His investigation led to a private medical facility where Dennis conducted his experiments. The evidence discovered at the facility revealed the true extent of Dennis's crimes. Investigators found detailed journals documenting systematic medical experiments, preserved tissue samples, and extensive digital records of his activities. The facility contained a fully equipped medical laboratory with modern surgical equipment and monitoring systems. The final confrontation occurred on October 15, 2024. After tracking Dennis to his facility, the investigator confronted him in the laboratory. During an attempted escape, Dennis sustained fatal injuries. His final words, recorded by surveillance equipment, revealed his disturbing motivation. "I simply wanted to understand the limits of human existence." The subsequent investigation shocked the nation. Forensic teams discovered human remains in various stages of preservation throughout the facility. The examination of Dennis's detailed records suggested over 100 victims, though investigators could only conclusively confirm 47 deaths. Multiple burial sites were discovered in remote locations, containing additional victims. Evidence processing revealed the full scope of Dennis's activities. His laboratory contained systematic documentation of unauthorized medical experiments, extensive tissue and organ collections, advanced medical equipment used in his procedures, detailed records of drug trials and patient responses, and digital archives of his experimental procedures. The legal aftermath proved complex. The victim's father faced criminal charges for his actions. Despite receiving a 25-year sentence, public sentiment strongly favored his release. A grassroots movement supporting his case gained significant momentum, leading to legal reforms in cases involving vigilante justice against serial offenders. The investigation's findings led to substantial changes in medical oversight. Healthcare facilities implemented enhanced verification systems, strengthened protocols for controlled substances, improved monitoring of private practices, and developed advanced systems for detecting unusual patterns in patient mortality. The case prompted a comprehensive review of healthcare security. New regulations emerged for private medical practices, background check requirements intensified, and systems for tracking medical supplies became more robust. Prescription pattern monitoring advanced significantly, while medical waste disposal underwent strict protocol reforms.